Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a very exciting panel discussion this afternoon with representatives of the great camera and lens company, Panavision. My name is John Mason. I'm with the Arizona International Film Festival. I'm the Director of Special Projects, and I'll be your host this afternoon. We are delighted, beyond delight, to have our guests with us who will share their insight, their expertise, their knowledge from only a perspective that they entertain, given their position in the business. And so I'm delighted to have these guests with us. We are going to be joined very shortly by Aaron Safa, who's the head of Panavision's new Filmmaker Program, which should be of great interest to all independent filmmakers who are listening, and also at the session.
Hey, John, I'm sorry, it's Aaron calling in from Panavision. I'm not able to join the video part for some reason, so I had to call in. I apologize if I interrupted you there.
No problem. I think my colleague TJ behind the scenes there is probably working on it, but if we have you on audio, that will take the audio. So I'm introducing you as head of the Panavision's new Filmmaker Program. And you might want to wave. We have David Dodson, who's the Senior VP of Client Relations and Business Development. David's got that cool hat on. And we have we have two cool hats. We have Brian Mills, Lens Manager, and Christine Carr, Business Development Director at Light Iron, post-production company extraordinaire. Okay, what we will do in the audience, you will see, those of you who are watching, down at the bottom of your screen, a Q&A bar. If you have questions, which I hope you will have, please type those in. I will be monitoring those, and we'll get to those at the end of the session. So let's begin. We have a lot of ground to cover. Let's go to Aaron, who is going to tell us a little bit about Panavision's new Filmmaker Program. Aaron?
Yeah, thank you, John. And I apologize to everybody that I'm not able to see you all. So anyways, well, this will have to do, I guess. This is the world we live in now. But
We've lost Aaron.
And we've seemed to have lost Aaron. Aaron, are you back with us?
Oh.
Aaron? Okay, what I think we will do is move on, and hopefully we can get him back. Let's go to Mr. Dodson. And let me ask a couple of questions. Again, David is Senior VP of Client Relations and Business Development. He's got kind of a business marketing, high altitude overview of the company. David, needless to say, this has been a difficult year for the industry and for Panavision. How has Panavision been weathering the storm?
That's a really good question. You know, we all came back, or several of us came back in June when we were allowed to come back in the building. And, you know, the place was kind of a mess because, you know, in March when everything kind of got shut down, we were right in the middle of pilot season. And the house was full of, you know, all sorts of people here prepping for pilots, and it shut down, you know, with the notice from the studios that, you know, yeah, we're just going to shut down for 2 weeks, and, you know, then we'll all be back at it. And, you know, 4 months later, we kind of show up, and there was just, you know, people really had just kind of walked out and left everything there because they thought they were coming back, you know, in their defense. But I mean, they let everything was here. I mean, from clothes to tools to carts and everything, then the place was just, filled with everything. And so we had to spend the first week or so just kind of cleaning up the place. And at the same time, Europe had actually opened up, about 6 or 7 weeks before.
Seem to have lost David's audio. TJ, did David maybe mute himself? There we go.
David is not muted. We just cannot hear him.
What do you think's going on?
I don't know. It's possible Zoom is having technical issues.
Brian, are you with?
Yeah, I'm here. Do you copy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Christine,
John,
I'm here.
I'm also back. This is Aaron. I'm also back. So I don't know if I should try mine again.
are you there, Aaron? Wow, we're having some interesting problems here today.
Goodness.
Aaron?
I can hear you now,
Okay.
but
And we can hear you now, David. You
okay,
wanna-
good. Anyway, so, we're back, we're fully staffed now. We're kind of waiting on the network upfronts coming up, but, we're manufacturing is at full tilt. They're building stuff. We're putting out probably 35 or so lenses a month, a really good pace, and building all sorts of accessories, still shipping equipment all over the world just from being busy around the country. But, we still don't have, several of the people back in the building. But, I think that'll happen probably over the next month or two. We'll just have to kind of see how that goes. But, every one of our offices around the world are at full capacity as far as the demand is concerned. So it's been nice seeing, production levels come back. It would probably be nicer if it was a little more normalized, and maybe, but it probably won't anytime this year. So, but we'll get through it, and, with the help of everybody. And, but there's definitely been, there's tough months ahead, because it looks like the production levels over the next, 3 or 4 months are going to be, as high as we've ever seen it.
Wow. Well, that's good news and bad news on that one. David, were there any particular measures or protocols that you put in place to get through the pandemic?
We did all the obvious things that the CDC and all the state and local people had, suggested, as far as getting the building, fixed up with PPE everywhere and signs, and, of course, everyone following the rules of wearing masks and keeping socially distant. And we also built or brought in what was called an ozone trailer out in our shipping and receiving area, in order to disinfect all the equipment that would be coming in and out of the building. And every time it goes out and comes back in, we have to put it through the disinfecting process. We already, the stuff that we service gear with was already cleaning, any kind of, really acting as a disinfectant. But, putting it in the ozone chamber and killing all the virus and stuff, I think it made our customers and our employees feel much safer touching everything, and I think we're probably not far from getting away from that, since things are starting to loosen up a little bit, because it's certainly labor intensive to do that. But we felt it was an important measure to do, just to try to make people feel comfortable.
David, are there some different procedures, office to office, country to country? I know, some countries in Europe have different levels of this and that, and restrictions and openness. Do you have different stages, flavors of what you're doing there to accommodate some of that?
Well, we're trying, what we're doing here, we're doing in every office because certain states will have different changes, in their CDC rules or local rules. And so it's very difficult for us to try to say, well, okay, Georgia, you guys can behave this way, and Chicago, you guys can behave this way. So we've still just adopted, our original protocol process where, it's still just like I said, we're still, providing and PPE for everyone and wearing masks and keeping socially distant. We've been very fortunate here and in all of our offices with having very few positive cases, whether they be from employees or whether they be from customers. So we've been blessed with not having too much of a hassle there, just because the contact tracing rules are, they're very laborious. So we've been lucky.
Absolutely. Let's go back for a minute to you're saying that production is kind of queuing up pretty steeply and back. What's going on there? Is this simply because things have been the increase in production that you're seeing? Is that because of the pandemic and just the stoppage all around, or is it because maybe there are more outlets now for content? What do you see happening in 2021?
Well, I mean, certainly a lot of it is because everybody is needing content because they used everything they had for these last 7 or 8 months that everybody's been home, which I think has been a real positive thing for the streamers to probably, add more subscribers and so on and so forth, which, anytime they do that, that's just going to ignite our business even more and the demand will come greater. But I think we're seeing, things rather chaotic from all of those people because they're trying to play catch up. And so many people didn't work, for all of those months. And I know that certain people were trying to wait till, May or so before they got things going. So they would hopefully have a few less restrictions on set. And I think that's probably one of the reasons that we're seeing May, June, and July, August, so slammed. I mean, we're so busy now that, I don't see it letting up at all the rest of the year. Which,
Wow.
it's, like you said earlier, that's a good and bad problem because it puts us in a position, to potentially have to turn down, our most loyal people and people that, we care a lot about. And that's a terrible position for all of us to be in. But I know us and other competitors are dealing with the same stuff as well.
Sure. In terms of equipment choices, are you seeing any lasting effects in terms of equipment that you see from the adjustments made by the industry? What are the trends you're seeing in how productions are approaching and how they are approaching their equipment choices?
Well, the biggest additions, I think, to everyone, cameras and lenses and your basic stuff are always, they're remaining the same. But what they've done, because of social distancing, they're adding, several more monitor stations so people can be spread out and viewing the material on stage. Almost all of these shows have been adding equipment like devices to where they can transmit, through Wi-Fi, across the country, to executives and or people, and there's devices for that where they can transmit to people back in the office. Anything to keep the producers away from the set that doesn't have to be there. Producers that are working from home, we're able to broadcast with minimal delay to their homes where they can watch performance and stuff like that. And that has become a very common thing to do that. There are a couple of, there's devices that, we purchase that we can supply for them, but there's also some companies out there that I think have taken on that role as well in providing that kind of service. But I see, I see more and more of this allowing people to stay at home and not have to come to the set. It's been a very common thing for writers being able to send the pictures back to the writers' rooms and stuff like that, and keeps them away, and they're perfectly happy, I think, for the most part. They seem to enjoy it, and I see that continuing at some level. It could taper off, certainly, but I think it's such a proven device, and I think they've been very successful with being able to use those devices and to keep people away, that it'll probably stick around for a while.
Very interesting, very interesting. We're going to hear about Panavision lenses in a minute. But
That's the good part.
Panavision also designs and innovates throughout the entire, boy, I'm having trouble talking today. Panavision designs and innovates throughout the filmmaking process, including your relatively new DXL2 camera. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And
Sorry, I'd lost you again.
I was asking about your new innovations aside from lenses, the other kind of great things that you guys have been doing from a product point of view, and one of them, of course, is that new DXL2 camera. Could you tell us a little bit about that camera?
Sure. That was that camera was made, I think we're 4 or 5, probably at least 4 years now into that camera. And it was made out of a necessity to have something to put all of our legacy 65 millimeter and large format lenses on. We needed to be able to control our destiny just a little bit. And, once Airflex had decided not to, let the Alexa 65 be out of their rental system, we kind of felt like that, we had to have something to where we could control, a little bit about what we do. We have 50 years worth of, or, 5 decades worth of different large format lenses. And since all that, we've built more and resurrected more. And, from all the old stuff that we've had, it's been, that camera's been a real good thing for us. It shoots 8K. 8K, I think was scary in the beginning. And, but what our engineers did, as far as making it, user-friendly, has been remarkable. It's been a very successful camera for us, accepted all across the industry. But, and we'll do everything we can to try to keep that camera relevant. Because it's still a great, it's a great sensor, and, but cameras are going to come and go, and, they're going to continue, we've got to continue developing, at some point with all of that. And, because other manufacturers will continue to develop as well. And, but it's been a great item for us.
What does that camera, with all of its versatility, with that 8K resolution and that dynamic range and 60 frames per second, what are the advantages on the set for the cinematographer?
A lot of, what we did, as far as when we to go and built that camera, we built that camera to try to be very assistant friendly. And, that was one of the key things as far as what the as far as the cinematographer, we worked with them in the beginning, to create their lookup tables and stuff like that. And just try to make, listen to the feedback from the customers, and, keep the camera as versatile as possible. And just, keep listening to our customers, and because we're always trying to improve on things.
Absolutely. And are there any other products, innovations that you've got up on that stage that you can tell us about, things that you're working on that we might see soon?
The biggest thing, and probably the most important thing that we're working on right now, is various lenses. Because of the demand, we're out of lenses all the time, and we're building them as fast as we can. I think we're probably not far from, running another shift in manufacturing to try to, help with that demand. I know you're going to talk to Brian, and, and Brian Dan Sasaki and his group have been working on lenses since the day we got back. And I mean, they're the busiest department I think I've ever seen across town. It's amazing that every day they're slammed. There's no shortage. There's no shortage of work there. But we're continuing to talk about optics because that's what our cinematographers want to talk about. They like cameras and stuff like that, but they really like lenses. And I think, just from our legacy, lenses is a very important place for us to maintain our focus.
Well, that has provided a very wonderful segue into the lens department. But before we do that, I'm seeing a face down there that has joined us. Aaron, welcome.
I finally made it. We had to, TJ behind the scenes did a great job of, we had to circumvent the email that I was using to use a different email. I don't know, but it finally worked.
Nothing like making a dramatic entrance so we all notice you.
That's what it really was. I just wanted to make a dramatic entrance. So
all right. Well, look, you were just starting to tell us about the new Filmmaker Program. Why don't you give us some details?
All right. Shall we tempt fate again and see if it kicks me off? I don't know. This technology does not want to be on this meeting in the worst way. So we'll see. I appreciate it. And I'm sorry, everybody. I appreciate your patience. So I will be very brief because the reality is that the other three panelists here are going to give everyone much more useful information, but it is important that I just tell you all about the new Filmmaker Program, because essentially what that is the umbrella under which we, as the new Filmmaker Program, offer resources, offer assistance, support to the community of up-and-coming filmmakers. A lot of times we find that people look at Panavision as a brand that they look forward to working with in someday, and maybe they feel like they're not there yet, or in some way it's an aspirational thing. And we don't want you to think that way. We want you to know that there are that the relationship with Panavision should start now. And so we do things like set panel conversations like this up. We work with universities all the time. We do classes. We do in pre-COVID and hopefully soon to be post-COVID times. We do lens demos and camera demos and tours of the facilities, all kinds of great stuff. And then, of course, the real tentpole of the new Filmmaker Program that everyone really thinks of when they think of the NFP is the new Filmmaker Program grant. And that is a program that has existed for over 25 years. And it is a year-round application. So we accept applications all the time where we let you use professional Panavision camera equipment for your shoot. And that goes out to educational institutions, to other groups, but also to individual filmmakers, most importantly. It is important that I say the caveat right now, which is that obviously we've been through a pandemic. The NFP grant has been on hold, but we are looking forward to bringing that back. And Panavision is extremely committed to it. To the point that I will just bring into the conversation, Christine is here from Light Iron. And when we do relaunch the grant, we are actually going to be doing so with both the equipment grant that we've had for all these decades, and also going to be bringing into this a separate grant with Light Iron, a post-production grant that you'll also be able to apply to. So I will maybe just throw into the chat nfp@panavision.com. I hope that was just to the panelists. How do I? Maybe someone behind the scenes. Looks like I can only chat the panelists. So TJ, maybe behind the scenes there, you can put that email that I put, nfp@panavision.com. That is the email that you can email to us to basically ask any questions about the grant or otherwise. We're always here as a resource and a support for you guys. So that's what I wanted to let you all know about. I expect all the filmmakers out there listening to be applying for the grant and emailing me.
You're going to get inundated. And Aaron, when do you think the program might start up again?
Okay. So we are actually looking at a June 1st reopening date that we're pretty close to locking in at this point for applications, since you asked. But yeah. Excellent.
A wonderful program. And I know we are very filmmakers here, very, very interested in that. Thank you. Okay, let's get over into that optics division with Mr. Mills. And Brian, for those who don't know, tell us what the special optics department at Panavision does.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate being on the panel. So special optics in a nutshell, our conversation begins with the cinematographers. It's very typical for me in a day to start off speaking with a cinematographer and talking about an upcoming project that they might have in mind and discussing various lens choices. As David alluded to earlier, we have basically 50 years worth of lenses to choose from, and they vary in characteristics. So the first conversation usually starts out by describing what the mood or the feeling of the project is, what the camera body that they'll be using is, what format, and so on. And then we'll drill down a little bit and get into exactly what types of lenses might be the best fit for that project. Once we've gotten it narrowed down a little bit, the customer comes in and we will project various types of lenses and shoot lens tests and talk about their different characteristics and what makes them special or right for the project. If they can't find something off the shelf, then we are happy in most cases to create a special look for the customer and then go through another series of tests and hopefully end up in a situation where they're, you know, certainly pleased with what we've delivered for them. In addition to that, I spend a little over half the day manufacturing custom lenses, doing attachments, custom parts. So if a customer might have a unique idea about seeing around a corner in a certain shot, or maybe split diopters, or I think this week we made some magic mushroom lens attachments that amplify colors and kind of emote the feeling of being on mushrooms. So every day is a little bit different. It's super challenging and really fun.
Very, very interesting. For all the new technology in filmmaking, the optics inside a lens uses the same basic the optics inside a lens uses the same basic technology as has been used for many years. What about modern cinema glass is the same, and what has changed in recent years?
You know, the most notable things that have changed are format and coverage and how big the images are nowadays. So here at Panavision, we have been in a race to adapt as fast as we can to the new camera bodies, new sensor sizes. Utilizing our vintage glass as well has been very, very helpful. As far as what has changed, I would say that, you know, the pacing in films and TV was a lot different 30 years ago than it is today. If you look at a lot of the vintage lenses, say from the 60s, 70s, the close focus on them might be around 3 or 4 feet. The stop is around a 2.8 or a 3. And as people are vying for attention with their projects, we've noticed a more hyper state of trying to get the audience's attention. And the way that cinematographers are doing that is by getting more intimate with the lenses in the respect of, you know, super close focus. So crush depth of field, very fast speeds on the lenses so that the out of focus portion of the images are super artistic and painterly. And so that is probably the most notable, us having to either make new lenses that are closer focus and faster, or adapt our older ones to meet today's needs.
With that new camera that we're talking about, the DXL2, with that amazing sensitivity, do you also need new lenses?
You don't need new lenses. Lens choice has definitely played a greater role with the sensitivity of cameras nowadays. I would say that, you know, just like I would never suggest to an artist to use just acrylic or just spray paint or just airbrush. It's our job to provide all the different mediums for them to create the images that they find pleasing or that are right for the project. And so we've noticed that people are getting much more adventurous when it comes to breaking down the sensors on these very sharp computers, or what are cameras, but basically computer chips. So yeah, a large responsibility of the special optics group is to try and manipulate the sensors to get pleasing pictures with our lenses.
And maybe to continue a little bit on that, what do you see as the upcoming trends in lens use? And are cinematographers moving into different types of lenses or trying new things?
Yeah, they are, of course. I think one of the trends that I foresee in the near future is cinematographers playing around with format a lot more. As we've gotten into larger format, 65 millimeter is about as close to human perception as we can get with lenses. In other words, if you have a shot and your subject is near a telephone pole, with large format, that telephone pole will seem like where it is in real life. And then if you take 35 millimeter, that telephone pole will be a little bit closer, and then 16, it'll be even closer than that. So I foresee people playing with different formats, like mixing formats, 16, 35, 65, in order to create claustrophobic situations or more airy, open feelings.
And for an up and coming cinematographer, Brian, what advice would you give in determining lens choice? And in particular, if they don't perhaps have a huge budget, how can they get the most bang for their buck on an indie budget?
I would say that the first thing is just doing research on what characteristics you can expect from different manufacturers. American lenses seem to lean a little more warm versus German or Japanese lenses are typically a little bit cooler, but there is no substitute for putting the lenses on a body and going into practical situations and seeing how they photograph. That's our advice for cinematographers. We can only do so much on a projector in-house with evaluating the characteristics and sort of telegraphing what kind of pictures the cinematographers are going to get. At the end of the day, the rubber meets the road when they go out into the real world and start shooting subjects and seeing what type of images they're going to get. As far as budget, I think Panavision prides itself on being accessible to all parties. I can say that, I can't count the number of students that I've dealt with in the beginning that eventually became very successful cinematographers. So we take it very seriously, the students that come into our building, and we try to treat them just like we would a regular paying customer. I, of course, can't speak to budget. That's David's area, but I know that we try to be as accessible as possible. It also bears mentioning that I would say some of the greatest innovations or the most interesting things that special optics have come up with are ideas from students. Students aren't tied to the bureaucracy that some of the bigger tentpole features or cinematographers might be attached to. They don't have to answer to anyone really, so sky's the limit for them. They can kind of create and do what they see, and they really are the trendsetters. So it's not lost on Panavision how important our relationship is with up and coming cinematographers.
Can you think of a specific example of some crazy idea that some student threw at you in the studio that you said, "My gosh, I think you're onto something"?
Yeah. We've had anamorphic lenses turned on their side to breathe horizontally instead of vertically. I can't recall it was for a music video, and I can't recall which one it was offhand. I'll try to remember before the panel's up. But yeah, it's always interesting and always fun to work with the students.
Absolutely. Okay. Very, very interesting. All of this is, and I want to let the people in the audience know I'm seeing some questions come in. We're going to save those here until we get to Christine. So let's get to Christine, Business Development Director at Light Iron, and she's going to tell us, first of all, a little bit about Light Iron and what services you provide.
Fantastic. Hi, nice to see everybody. So Light Iron is a post facility that began in 2009 and actually was really one of the first innovators in digital capture and digital processing. At that time, still most projects were being captured on film, digitized, and then put back to film for distribution. So Light Iron has been an innovator since we began. In 2015, we were acquired by Panavision. And as part of the expansion that allowed, that is when I joined the team. My background was also in both film and digital capture. I worked on Collateral, which was one of the first digitally shot films to be nominated for an Oscar. I also worked on Avatar and Game of Thrones. So that's a little bit about my background. So the services that we offer at Light Iron are really wonderfully integrated with Panavision. We offer dailies, and then we offer finishing, which is the color and conform, and then the final deliverables that actually get aired either on your TV or in a theater. And now with COVID, we've made a lot of advancement in remote services where we can offer remote dailies. So wherever people are in the world, if they have a gig per second upload, they can just load their camera card into a computer, upload it to Light Iron, and we can do the dailies at our facility without actually having to have somebody on location. We also are offering remote offline services where, same thing, we can send you a computer and you can access your media in our New York facility from wherever the editors are in the world. We have a lot, especially during COVID, we had a lot of TV shows using this service. So they kept their editorial teams intact, but everybody was at home. The editors and the assistants were all at home accessing their material at a Light Iron facility in New York. And but really they could work anywhere in the world. And then our other remote service that we offer is remote color correction, where the colorist is either working at home or working in the facility, and the client is at home, either looking at a monitor or at an iPad Pro and doing a live color correction session remotely.
I would be tempted to say this is kind of a, would revolutionary be too strong a word for this shift to mobile and post? Sounds pretty amazing.
It's so interesting because what's amazing is that the technology was already there. The technology was there, but we hadn't pushed this hard to do this. And it was there, and really it made possible that filmmakers could also work from home. And I think it's just such a unique time. And I think even as we start moving back into the facility, we see that some people are super eager to get back in the theater and color correct on a giant screen or on a very expensive monitor. And some people really just prefer to stay home and do it from home.
Well, it's just kind of a different world out there all through the system. At what point typically, Christine, should a production get involved in at what point do you typically get involved in a production? And what advice would you give filmmakers in properly planning for post-production and finishing?
You know, I actually have like a whole class on that, but I'll keep it brief. So typically we get involved in the earliest planning stages. Once the show or either the series or the film is a go and has a green light, and they have a DP assigned, or sometimes even before the DP is assigned, that's when we get involved. Usually what's happening is they are testing cameras and lenses like we just talked about, and they're looking for their look for the film or for the show, and they usually have something in mind but sometimes what they have in mind isn't available, or what they had in mind isn't actually what gets executed. So what we like to do is get involved in testing and get them into the DI theater. So they're not just looking at it at Panavision, but they're looking at it in the DI theater with a colorist, so that they can start playing with the colorist and start like finding their look. And at that point, what we usually like to do is create a custom showlet or lookup table. And then that information gets used through the dailies process. So when they're looking at it they're looking at their footage on set, or when they're looking at their dailies, that custom color application has been applied to their footage. And that way, the cinematographer's vision that he had from the very beginning is being carried through the process. Because as everybody knows, like, people fall in love with dailies because they look at it for weeks and weeks and weeks. And so when it comes to the DI, when people are in final color correction, no matter what creative vision that he had initially, there's always a producer or somebody at the end who is like, just make it look like the dailies. So what's great is if you involve us at the beginning, we can intervene in that from the very beginning. So if somebody says, make it look like the dailies, you're like, great, we have that. And now we're going to just really refine it.
Yeah, that's usually something the cinematographer likes to be responsible for, is that final look of the film. The look of the film going in and the look of the film going out is usually on the mind of the DP.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we 100% support that and want to give people the tools to do that. And one of my primary evangelisms is work with us and get that custom showlet so that we can carry your vision all the way through. And then the time that you spend in color correction is all about refining that vision and not, building it up from scratch, essentially.
So Christine, what can go wrong in that process? And I think what you're talking about is workflow.
Yes.
And you have something at the beginning, the set photography, you have the dailies, you have the DI, you have the finishing. What goes wrong in the signal, the color, the rain, through that process, so that what is shot is not what we get at the end? What happens?
It's funny, I don't see so much that there is something that goes wrong. What I see a lot is divergent opinions. If there's a divergent opinion between the DP and the director, or if there's a divergent opinion, like maybe the DP and the director are in sync, but maybe there's a producer who has a strong voice, who has a different opinion. And sometimes, people just want to put their fingerprints on the process. And that's where things, I wouldn't say go wrong, but that's where conflict shows up. And it's, that can be a delicate area to navigate.
Indeed. Well, this booklet you have on steps and procedures for getting you involved, is that if someone out there in our audience would like to write you or contact you about?
It's not a book.
Maybe that's on your website.
It's actually like a talk that I do. But if you're at a university, or if you're like if you're in film school, if you're in any kind of school situation like that, or if you have like a filmmakers club and you're interested, I'm totally happy to spread this word. So you can reach out to me or to Aaron. Actually, Aaron sets up a lot of our educational programs.
Excellent. Given all the advances in color correction and finishing, and much what you're just talking about, some filmmakers perhaps spend less time and focus on the images they capture, thinking they can fix it in post. I'm sure you've heard that a time or two.
Sure.
Can you address this and talk about what can and can't be, or perhaps better said, should or shouldn't be addressed in post?
Such a great question, because the thing is, like, we're the last chance, we're like the last time that the filmmakers have with their film. But so much of how we spend that time, depends on what happened on set. And sometimes it's not in their control. Like, for example, I was thinking about this movie that we did recently that was a Western. It was a classic Western. And there are big scenes that are outdoors with a lot of action. It's cattle drives and stampedes. And these scenes took, many days to shoot a scene that is supposed to really take place within like maybe an hour. And time of day, where is the sun? How are the shadows? I mean, it's gonna, so we have like a, let's say a 5-minute scene that probably spans, 10 hours over 3 days. And, it's dumped in the color slab and said like, okay, make it match. And it's really heavy lifting. It can be really heavy lifting for the colorists to do that, but they do it and they get it like you believe it. This was a day, this was a moment in time. And something like that you couldn't control. Like you're shooting with cows, you're shooting outdoors, like that's not something really within a filmmaker's control, like to only shoot in like some narrow band. But so there are things like that. And then there are also, I was thinking about this. But it's like, and there are other things like if it's like a super action movie, like, well, you're just gonna, you're gonna end up shooting some equipment in the scene because you've got to cover everything. There's multiple cameras going. There are just things that you're gonna end up fixing in post. And that's okay. We expect that. But the more that you can prevent that, the more that you can keep your eye on that in the edit, the more of the time that you have in the color room you can spend refining your image. Because really, color is about making it match and having people like drop into the scene and not be distracted by like a light or that didn't match or the skin tone looks funny. So you're dropping people into the scene so they believe it, but you're also really creating the emotional tone of your film is so much in the color. I'm sure you guys have seen that thing. It's called like film barcodes, where it takes like a single frame throughout the movie and it looks like a barcode, but you can see like the color palette of a film is really, most films is really quite narrow. And you can get the emotional tone just by looking at that. Is it a warm family comedy? Is it like a cold murder mystery? Is it a horror movie? Like it's in the palette.
It's so interestingly and well said. That example you gave of a 5-minute scene that took a week to shoot and keeping it all straight, consistent. Is there a lot of equipment that a filmmaker needs to make some of this happen? I mean, expensive equipment, gear, personnel to pull this off, or?
Really, we're storytellers. All of us here in this room, we're storytellers, and that's this medium, right? Like there was a movie that got made in the earliest sort of darkest part of COVID called Social Distance. It's on Netflix, and it was really a group of people, a group of filmmakers at home with their families using their iPhones to make this movie. We did the DI on that. So I can tell you for sure that really is how it was made. And it really captures the moment. It captures the moment of COVID, the weirdness and the fear and all of that. And it was made with a bunch of iPhones that everybody in this room probably has. So you have the tools. It's really the storytelling. It really, really is. But since you're here, you know that there are like extraordinary tools available to tell your story. And the earlier that you can get us involved to support you, just the greater power you have.
Totally. Christine, post-production is where technology is perhaps moving the fastest. Where are you seeing that happen in your work? And how does Light Iron stay ahead of the curve of this rapidly changing technology?
Oh, that's pretty juicy. what I've seen and what has been so escalated in COVID is, sadly, it's the further collapse of theatrical, right? And so one of the things that happened for us, for Light Iron in this process, was especially for our independent filmmakers, we said, hey, let's not do a theatrical color pass. Let's focus your time and your budget on doing HDR, because HDR is, it's not just the future, it's here. Like any TV you go buy now for the last several years is HDR compatible. Everybody's moving toward HDR.
Could you,
The streamers all want.
could you
Sorry?
define that? Could you define
Oh,
that,
sorry.
please?
Yes, HDR stands for high dynamic range. What you're used to watching on your TV is 709, which is now called standard dynamic range. It used to just be called video. But once we had high dynamic range, they had to invent a new term called standard dynamic range. So high dynamic range actually expands the field of color. And what's amazing about it is, like, in the beginning of HDR, it was like, ooh, the brights, we can get so bright. But now what we're really playing with is the depth of the shadow, that you can really, really see into the darkness in HDR. So like regular video is 0 to 100, and 0 is, or 100 is like the high point of brightness. And in that brightness is, like, think about like blown out skies and like the loss of detail of a tree against a sky. But in HDR, it goes 0 to 1,000. And in that brightest bright of 1,000, you can see the details of the sky and the detail of the cloud and the detail of the tree against the sky. And it's just a really super deep palette to play in. And if you've bought a TV in the last 3 years, you have an HDR compatible TV. All the streamers, Netflix, Hulu, and now the studios are all demanding an HDR deliverable when we're finishing our projects. So this is the future of your projects, is HDR. And so what I was saying, how that changes for us with Light Iron, what I've been advising our independent filmmakers is, let go of a theatrical distribution, focus on HDR. This is where your project is going to live. It's going to live on Amazon. It's going to live on Netflix. It's going to live on Hulu. So get that dynamic range of color and make the most beautiful piece that you can make within this range. Because as much as we love spending our time in the theater in color correction, it's like very romantic. People really fall in love with their own movies at that end process. I mean, because it's always like a big emotional journey, but the end of it is where they get to really fall back in love with their movie. But we're encouraging people to let's do this on an HDR monitor now, because really this is where your project will live.
That's fascinating. And I think, maybe a quick question back over to the Panavision guys, the camera and lens guys, and then we'll take questions from the audience. To deliver this HDR master, isn't it true that it all starts with a camera? You've got to have a camera that can capture that dynamic range.
Well, actually, I can speak to this real quick, if that's okay, because the image, when people are capturing in camera, we're capturing a log image, the full range that's available. And both theatrical and HDR can take advantage of that full range. It's via scope, but both a theatrical and an HDR expression of that, or like a translation of that log image, can capture that full dynamic range that gets captured in camera.
Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate it. Let me take a couple of questions here. Could someone discuss the apparent trend to use antique glass to soften digital capture?
Sure. Yeah, well, that's been going on for I would say, I guess, since the inception of digital cameras. And so antique glass, there are a few attributes that are complementary to digital capture. So the first I would say is the actual composition of the glass. So, I would assume we're talking about lenses from 50s, 60s, 70s. And at the time, EPA regulations were pretty loose, and the composition of glass would contain radium and lead and thorium, all compounds that are have very good wavelength transmission. So a heavily leaded glass element might make a very rich and pretty blue. The other attributes that are complementary with vintage lenses are the fall off. In other words, the field curvature of the lenses, them being prime designs where there's no moving elements. So that adds to a layering effect where you might mimic film. So if you think of film has 7 layers of emulsion, and each wavelength is landing in a different layer. With digital, you have a sensor and it's flat, and the wavelengths with vintage lenses are trying to dive either behind or in front of the sensor, and that creates sort of a shading of the ball effect and gives you a little more depth mimicking film. So I think that would be the reason that there's such a huge demand for vintage lenses right now.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah.
Another question, no pun intended here, but has the rise in drone activity, how has that affected Panavision's approach to cinematography and photography, drone use?
We just tell people don't fly our lenses. No, that's not completely true. We do choose which lenses we'd like people to fly or not fly. Whether they listen to us, that's a completely different story. But yeah, the demand for lighter lenses that are more compact is definitely felt, and our engineers are aware and are taking steps to provide that for customers.
Brian, I think this is another one for you. Is there a way for them to manufacture some of their old classic vintage primos or C-series anamorphic lenses, for example, in the same methods that they were manufactured in the past, so that new lenses could produce the same image we've all come to love from those lenses, but with an image circle for larger sensors and more robust lens mechanics? That's kind of a
I got you.
A long one.
The short answer is yes, we could. The long answer is that manufacturing the glass using the same techniques and the same compounds that they used back when those lenses were made is incredibly cost prohibitive. So, typically let's say a front element on a modern lens, like one of our T series, is somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000. And if we were to hire one of our manufacturers to make a vintage piece of glass of the same type for like our Cs, they would have to apply for a what's the word I'm looking for? They would have to apply for a pass from the EPA for one to even get the glass manufactured. And by the time they finish, the element would probably cost us between $15,000 and $20,000. So it's really just cost prohibitive. It can be done. But what we can do in special optics using various techniques is mimic the feel of some of the older vintage lenses with modern glass. And in a lot of cases, you get all the advantages of a modern lens with close focus and speed, but you get the feeling of a vintage lens.
And a camera question. Someone is asking about your relationship, partnership with Red on the DXL2 camera. Is this going to be limited to the DXL2, or do you have other plans to do other things with red?
I don't know that it's really something that we could talk about, but I know that, we are, we're talking to those guys all the time. And, because we're still working on further developing various things to the DXL. So I know there's conversations being had. I'm certainly not privy to be able to say if there's anything going on at this time.
Understood.
One thing that I'll throw in there about when Brian was talking about the drones, where we really prefer them not to use our lenses, or at least ask us if we have any lenses that would, be suitable in their package that we would be okay with flying. Because I think most of the time the customers, feel like, well, we're carrying insurance, so if something happens, everybody's covered. But there's lenses that Brian's talking about that they are, there's such a big part of our inventory that is not replaceable, no matter what. A lot because of the amount of, the type of glass that is used and so on and so forth. And even though we don't sell anything, we're still allowed to use some of that, call it illegal, glass, but it's only when you sell it is when it's a problem. But
Understood.
we would, yeah, I mean, it's, we're really not interested in the insurance check, because we, if we were to lose a couple of T-series lenses, it messes up a whole set, and we may never make those lenses again. So yeah, it's drones are a problem.
All right, here's another one. Were there special requirements for the lenses or cameras that were required for A Quiet Place 2? How did you work with Polly Morgan cinematographer to get the look and feel?
If I'm not mistaken, she was film for A Quiet Place 2.
Wow.
And I believe our T-series lenses were originally manufactured to be dedicated for digital cameras. And so we had to modify those lenses to be able to fit on a film camera. And I'm sorry, they all bleed together. We're so slammed these days. But I know that with A Quiet Place 2, Polly Morgan was very adventurous with the look. And we went through a number of iterations and customizations before we landed on the final type of lens and look and customization that she wanted to go with.
Are you guys, what are you seeing in terms of film use? Is there kind of a resurgence? Is it staying kind of steady? Is it falling off? What do you see happening?
It's been really busy lately.
What do you think's behind it, David?
I honestly don't really know if it's any single one thing. A lot of your heavy hitters have the power to shoot film, but we have seen, other music videos and commercials from, younger filmmakers that, have talked their producers into making it happen, and you have so many people coming out of film school today who's never even shot film. And so all of their heroes are shooting film, between Tarantino and J.J. Abrams and, Spielberg and people like that they want to get a taste of that. So I'm not exactly sure if it's any one thing.
Understood. Here's a question: with the ability to easily crop aspect ratios in post, is there a move away from anamorphics?
Never. The biggest thing about it's not necessarily because they cover an aspect ratio that someone wants an anamorphic lens. It's about the characteristics that glass provides with the compression and the way that Dan and Brian and them make those lenses. Because you can have, we have TV shows that are shooting, they're broadcasting in 16:9 that are shooting anamorphic, and it's all about the characteristic, the depth of field and everything of those lenses and flaring and all of that. So I don't see anamorphic going away anytime in the near future.
There are a couple of questions about whether you have any this would be a real tough one, especially on a public Zoom session. But there are questions about whether you guys have any favorite DPs, any special cinematographers that you get a warm, fuzzy feel for and like to work with, and or are impressed with their work, their talent, their vision.
You know, today we get pushed, you know, by so many DPs. You know, they've been allowed, you know, to really test the playing ground out there, and so they're always challenging us. And you know, and it's interesting, you know, when you have some younger DPs compared to older DPs that you know, that will challenge us, you know, but we're still getting, you know, there's it's really, you know, it'd definitely be awkward to talk about favorites and stuff. You know, we're inspired by many. You know, there are still so many, you know, of your older DPs that have been around a long time. I mean, from John Toll to Bob Richardson, you know, to Rodrigo Prieto and Kramer Morgenthau being one of the younger ones. You know, there's so many guys that we get to work with, and you know, we're fortunate to get to do that all the time. And you know, and there's younger people, there's people from all around the world that you know, we meet at places like Camera Maj, and then you know, and we have great conversations with them over there, and the next thing you know, we're talking to them over here. So the filmmaking community is very mobile. And I mean, I think Dan and Brian would say the same thing, you know, that we're very lucky to get to hang out with the people we get to hang out with.
Yeah, to expound on what David's saying, I would say also, you know, whether it's me or Dan, dealing with a cinematographer, you do foster a relationship with them to the point where, you know, after a couple projects, it's like calling an old friend. And that, in that sense, there are, you know, cinematographers that you enjoy working with.
Absolutely, and I'd love to continue on that theme. And we, as the audience knows, we are a little over 4 o'clock. We planned on that. We want to go a little long here. We knew we would. So hang in there with us. Have another very interesting question. Are cinematographers requesting timed or untimed dailies in the digital realm? How are they evaluating their footage? Are DP's contracts extended to be involved with the DI?
I'll take that one. Untimed dailies, honestly, I haven't seen that in my career. And I think now with basically every camera has a LUT that's called like a stock LUT, like a stock LUT that will take you from the log capture to 709. So people can view the dailies either on set or web dailies, which are very common, and then also the media that gets sent to editorial for them to start cutting. So ungraded dailies, it just doesn't exist. There's always like at least a 709 LUT conversion applied to it so that people can see it in the video space. But what we recommend, as I was saying, is like a custom show LUT that will take you into the 709 space, but in the color palette that the DP is going for.
Thank you very much. And another one, do the top tier cinematographers try to, quote, bake in their optical effects? Or is the trend toward shooting total raw capture?
You know, I see, I mean, I think we can probably, a couple of us can comment on that. I think that, you know, because we offer custom lenses, it does allow them, you know, the cinematographer to really come in and put their stamp on it. And certainly, you know, stay within the confines of the safety of, you know, the studio being the one that owns this project, and not to do stuff too crazy, you know, not to do stuff too wacky. So, but I definitely see them trying to, you know, to put their stamp on it, and that's, you know, and that sort of thing. You know, going back to some of the cinematographers that we, you know, have the pleasure to work with, you know, Mandy Walker comes to mind. You know, she has done some amazing projects, you know, recently, and she has one coming out. Hopefully it'll be out next year that she just did with Baz Luhrmann, you know, that was, it's called, you know, it's about Elvis. But I know Dan and Brian's group did an enormous amount of work for that, And then, and someone in your audience mentioned Polly Morgan. You know, she's getting ready to start a movie that's from a very amazing book, Where the Crawdads Sing. And so, you know, we get to, you know, like I say, again, I can't repeat this enough, is that, you know, we're blessed beyond belief, of how, of who we get to work with.
Well, on that theme, David, are you guys seeing more lady DPs, more DPs from different backgrounds and
For
walks of
sure.
life?
For sure. It's been, it's been a real good time for female cinematographers, and it's really great to watch them excel and bring a new, fresh look, to what we do. And so that's been so fun as well.
Are these new talents, from wherever they're coming from? Are they coming from film school or just walking in off the field someplace?
I mean, film school certainly, certainly has a lot of them come out of there. But there may be some that have been operators, that have moved up the ranks in operators and now shooting. And I think it's all over the place.
A question about HDR that's kind of interesting. I know in some of the systems, the workflows kind of require Dolby Vision or the HDR10. Do you have any comment on either one of those systems?
Dolby,
Christine.
Dolby Vision is a little easier process, I would say. And then the conversion from the HDR to 709 is an easier process within Dolby. I would say that. And I think, sorry, there was a part of your question earlier about whether DP contracts were extended to be involved with the DI. Many DPs have it in their contract a certain number of days that they get with the colorist to set their look.
And there's another comment about HDR. Are there any, this seems to be the wave of the future. You mentioned studios are all on board with it and so forth. Yes. Are any cinematographers pushing back against it?
I think like pre-COVID, there was a little bit of sense of like, I don't want to do that with some people. But we did a project. We did a project that was a very big project for Netflix. And they had a theatrical release in it as well. And so initially we spent a lot of time with the DP doing the theatrical color correction, because that's what he was used to. He was like, oh, the HDR, I don't really care about that so much. And so we spent our time with him doing the theatrical color correction. But then when we did the HDR and had him come in to review it, he got really excited about it. And it was like, it went from being like, oh, I don't want to like, oh, that's really interesting. And so we ended up spending quite a bit more time with him during the HDR color correction. And I think it was a great kind of process for all of us to really like dive into HDR and then compare the two. So I think it's just like a little resistance, but then once you get in, it's just a new tool set to play with.
And Aaron, I didn't want to make you think that we forgot you down there on the screen. A question comes in. What are you looking for with the filmmakers that apply for your grant? What gets your stamp of approval? What do you want to see in those proposals?
Right. Well, I'll say this. When it comes to the creative, we're not trying to call balls and strikes on people's creative perspectives. Obviously, there are red lines in the sand. We don't accept any films that would promote any sort of racial or gender stereotypes or any sort of bigotry. So there are red lines in the sand like that. But ultimately, in terms of the your artistic perspective, that we want to remain as neutral on that question as possible. And my perspective and my philosophy in running this program and running the grant is every project that applies starts as a yes, because our goal truly is to say yes to as many projects as possible, because we want to establish as many relationships as possible. Obviously, there are many reasons why, unfortunately, I'm not able to say yes to every project, equipment availability being number one. So I will just give a couple of broad thoughts about if you're applying for the grant. One is, what I want to see and what we all want to see is a project that looks like it's put together to go the distance. Obviously, we all know how difficult independent cinema is. I mean, really. And so despite everyone's best intentions, there are a lot of projects that don't make it to the finish line. It's very hard to get these done. So when you apply, and you'll see that in the materials that we request, We want to see a package that's put together that has all the pieces in place to fulfill your creative vision and logistically make it to the finish line, reasonably speaking. So we do ask about your budget. We do ask about your funding. Where is it coming from and all those things. We want to just make sure that we don't set aside camera gear and for your project, which means we can't give it to somebody else, and then it doesn't end up happening for whatever reason. So just say that's the main thing I would say when you put your application together. And then the only other thing I would just mention is, obviously there are limitations as to what we're able to give for grant projects. We always want everybody who gets a grant to feel like any other Panavision customer, really well taken care of with amazing gear and a great camera package, and that will happen. But that is going to be within a framework that doesn't include certain things which are just simply rented out too much. And we obviously can't take gear from projects that are paying full price to give it to people for free. So this is a changing picture over time, but the couple of big things are anamorphic lenses are off the table for grant projects. People ask all the time. It's a total non-starter because, as David indicated, they are forever popular, forever loved, and forever rented, hopefully. And then the other thing right now is that large format cameras are off the shelf as well. Those are just rented too often. So, it depends on what you want to shoot with a little bit as well. The Alexa Mini, for example, is a very, very popular camera. That's a tough one. But obviously there are many different camera systems and that we can use, and awesome optics and things that are still on the table for sure. So.
Thank you, Aaron. Another question here is, cameras continue to record higher resolutions. It feels like cinematographers are revolting in a way by using vintage glass to lower the resolving power optically. Why produce cameras and TVs with such high resolution other than the ability to crop or for effects?
I'd like to comment on that. Higher resolution in the camera does not equal a sharper image. It means there is more information. There's more pixels, which means there's more color gradations in that line. So for example, with the DXL2, the DXL2 can capture 8K, but we're not watching 8K. When you're watching Netflix, you're watching probably 3.8, you're watching UHD. But we've taken that 8K image and super sampled it down to UHD. So all of the information that was captured at 8K is now compressed into this image. And that means your colors are richer. That line isn't just black and white. There's so many pixels that are making up that line. It's so the qualities of the lenses that Brian was talking about, those painterly effects are enriched by the higher resolution. It's not lost by that.
All right, thank you, Christine. What is the mount for Panavision lenses? Are they proprietary or adaptable to other prosumer cameras like Sony, Fuji, Samsung, Panasonic?
Yes, the Panavision does have a proprietary mount, but we do make adapters that enable you to use our lenses on all types of different cameras.
Do you have indie pricing for your cameras and equipment?
I'll take that. We definitely, as I'm sure Aaron's alluded to and spoke about, that, we definitely try to help young filmmakers, even, that are beyond the level of a new filmmaker program. So we definitely do, try to help them. There are times of the year when, like, say, in a typical non-COVID world, we would have network broadcast shows go down in that area of, say, April and May and part of June. And that was a really good time for us to do those kind of films because we had an enormous amount of equipment sitting here on the shelf. But it doesn't mean that, that we wouldn't be open to doing it any other time of the year. It's all just based on the filmmaker and the project. And so, yes, we don't have any set pricing for it, but we definitely, if there's projects that we feel that we should be paying attention to, we try to make sure we're doing that.
Thank you, David. Here's an attendee. I have a set of original 20th Century Fox CinemaScope lenses made by Bausch and Lomb. Any insights you could provide on those particular lenses?
Well, they're beautiful. We have some here. Yeah, I presume that the roadblock is putting them on something, and of course we're a rental company. We don't sell anything, so we can't mount them for you. But there are companies that do rehousing of vintage glass. TLS comes to mind as one, and so you could if you're motivated enough and unfortunately you have a lot of money, then they'll go ahead and rehouse them for you and make them usable on modern cameras.
And now it's Oscar time, and there are a whole bunch of people being nominated for Oscars and Emmys. I'm sure all of these guys in cinematography have used Panavision.
I would hope so.
I remember the Kodak days. Remember, David?
Oh God, yes.
Who shot on Kodak? Who shot on something else? That's always a fun one.
Yeah.
I was there with you, John. I was at Kodak too. Don't forget. I remember those days.
All right. Here's one. Panavision has a storied history in the motion picture business, with the introduction over the years of camera and lens systems that have had profound effects. What would you highlight, you guys and gals and ladies, highlight as a few of Panavision's greatest or most significant achievements, and why?
I mean, I'll start, and then everybody else can pop in. But the having the, let's say, the upper management people that we've had in the past that believed in the kind of things that we would talk to them about expanding, our anamorphic inventory, and then the last set of anamorphic lenses that we've built were kind of designed, I think, or certainly were designed partly by Takumi Yagashima. And we built, I think 40 sets of those lenses, which was all over 500 lenses. And getting them to do that at a time when 7, 8 years ago, 10 years, 8 or 9 years ago, when, there's a lot of uncertainty, people going from film to digital, and what were the filmmakers really going to gravitate to? And, and for us to be able to, believe in anamorphic, the way we do, and getting the people in charge of the purse strings to build those lenses was, it was a great thing by, all of those folks. And we're on them again about, another new set. And because these ventures are very expensive, because you have to build a lot of them to have an impact. So our ability to do that and have the belief in that is, I think, definitely one of our greatest achievements. Brian and Christine can carry on from there.
Yeah, I would say one of the stories that just stands out, and one of my favorites, was when Tarantino came in the building, and we were taking him on a tour and going through manufacturing and just looking at some of the really old vintage stuff, and he pointed at some old Ben-Hur lenses that hadn't been used since the 60s, and asked if he could try and use those on the Hateful Eight and shoot it in Super 70. And I looked over at my boss because I really didn't know the answer, and he emphatically said yes. And I wasn't sure how we were going to do it, but just from a mechanical standpoint, breaking those lenses apart with the grease that hadn't been moved in 40 years and the smells that were coming out of these lenses, and going through the process of adapting them to a modern camera. Well, I'm sorry, our film camera, and then seeing the test footage in our theater, just seeing the images that were made from lenses that hadn't had light through them in 40 some odd years was really gratifying. And that one always holds a soft spot in my heart.
You guys must have had some amazing conversations walking around the plant with DPs and directors. Those are some treasured moments. You know, you got to be doing something right over there. You got 19 Academy Awards. Panavision has had quite the run.
You know, John, one thing, you know, when like Brian's talking about and you're talking about having people that come through here, you know, we still rent one of our most popular zoom lenses today, certainly because it can be expanded for larger sensors, is a lens that we still call the Bailey zoom. And it was built from John Bailey. You know, it was his idea sitting around the lunchroom table. And, you know, we built that back in the mid to late 90s. And you know, there's only probably maybe around 14 or so left, you know, that are in good working order, but they are all busy as can be. And so, you know, having that kind of legacy is, you know, it's so fun to have been around here this long and watched all that.
So well said, David. Well, look, guys.
Oh, sorry. Can
Christine.
I just answer that one too? Sorry, really briefly. For me, what's exciting is to see the movies that we're working on now and to see what I think will become the classics. Like the two Christmas Chronicles that we did for Netflix with what's his name, Kurt, as Santa Claus. So the Christmas Chronicles, things like, and then movies like Destroyer, or like the family comedies like Yes Day, and just to see like what I think are going to be the classics of the future.
So true. Absolutely. It is amazing. That's the real joy, is all the work you put into it. You get into that theater and you see what you've done, and you just get transported. It makes it all worthwhile. Aaron, I think we have to think about closing it up here for the day. We're pretty close to 4:30. I want to thank all of you so much. And as we wrap things up, any quick final thoughts about Panavision, about the movie business, about independent filmmaking, about the Arizona International Film Festival, and any last comments, Aaron?
I would just thank you for inviting us here. You know, my job is so cool because I get to work with really passionate, aspiring filmmakers, and being out in the marketplace like this in you know, other areas of the country is really exciting for me, because obviously I want to interact with all of you. So to the filmmakers that are out there, all I'm going to say is I really hope that the NFP will hear from you, the new Filmmaker Program will hear from you as a bridge to building your relationship with Panavision for many, many years to come. So I really appreciate these opportunities to do that, to start that process.
David.
Yeah, and I encourage all the new filmmakers, you know, out there to don't be afraid of this place. You know, it can be intimidating when you walk in here, and in case you didn't know anyone, and, you know, with the legacy and the history that this place has, and, you know, because I've heard that so much over the years that, you know, it's like it's kind of a scary place for a new filmmaker when he walks in and not knowing anybody. But, you know, I encourage you to just come in, bust the doors down, and come on in and make yourself known.
Brian.
Yeah, I'll second what David said. Like I alluded to earlier, nearly every big DP that we deal with was a student at some point, and they came in and we worked together. And it's a real pleasure to just be a part of their success and assist them in making these beautiful projects. So yeah, come on in and let's get it done.
All right, Christine, you take it, you wrap it up for us.
All right, and the same goes for post. Don't be intimidated by post. It is a rich playground for you. So reach out and find out about anything that isn't clear to you, or, I mean, any post facility is going to want to support you in executing your vision. So reach out, just reach out and talk to somebody about the project that you're thinking about, that you're about to embark on. Get post involved early.
So well said. And again, I thank you, Panavision, for reaching out to us. It's been a most enjoyable afternoon. Thank you so much. Very appreciative. Let's stay in touch. Thank you for being joining the Arizona International Film Festival and helping us being part of the family here this year. And I'm sure we'll be back again. Thank you again. Thank you out there in the audience for watching, and have a great rest of the afternoon. And again,
Thank you.
Thanks
congratulations
so
and
much,
thank you.
John.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks for having us. It's great to see you, John.
Our
Thank you.
pleasure. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.